Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this. I am really super excited. This is Pastor Matthew Best. I'm with the Synod Task Force on Homelessness and Affordable Housing. And with me today, I have a special guest, Jessica Reed, who is with Safe Families for Children. Jessica, welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. And so what we want to do, really simple for the folks who are watching is, I just did this with another organization to give an opportunity for some different organizations that deal a lot with a variety of folks who encounter a variety of challenging situations. So why don't you tell us just briefly a little bit about Safe Families for Children?
Sure. So Safe Families is a caring and compassionate community of families that are from local churches. And they really help families who are in, specifically who are isolated, but are just just need some help. So when they're navigating difficult circumstances with inflation, the pandemic, the rising cost of rent and housing is really making the family unit vulnerable. We believe that no parent and no family should have to navigate these situations alone. And through wraparound support that is really dealt out by volunteers who come from the church and also professionally supported, we feel that by supporting these families and wrapping around, that it's really going to strengthen that unit. The main goal is to keep families together, keep kids out of foster care, and strengthen that family unit, which is we feel is just the most important thing.
So you use the word wrap around a couple of times. Maybe you could explain what that means.
Sure. So we have a variety of roles that our volunteers use. So we have host families, which take in kiddos while parents are walking through some sort of temporary crisis that they're having in their life. We have a role called a family friend role. That is a person that supports the host family, but also we have family friends for our parents who are walking through whatever difficult situation they're navigating through. And so we have kids don't necessarily have to be hosted in somebody's home. You can have a family friend who's going to walk alongside that family, maybe provide some respite for an afternoon, drive that parent around to look for apartments if transportation is an issue, take them to the WIC office. It really just depends, and there's a professional staff that kind of assesses those needs to help guide our volunteers. We also have a family coach role, which is somebody who helps out the professional staff, but also goes in and makes sure that that kiddo, whoever's home they're in, is feeling safe and secure. It's just an extra added layer of support. And then, of course, the glue that holds it all together are the churches that take on this ministry. Those churches really support those volunteers that come from their congregation. That could be helping host families with diapers and formula and clothes, because sometimes they're going to have these kiddos come into their home and the kid's going to have no extra clothes or one pair of shoes that looks raggedy. Or maybe you have an infant who you need to provide formula and diapers for. And that's where the congregation is really going to be able to step up and support those volunteers. And so we call it a circle support. We like to take families that come in that need help, and we surround them with supportive people. And the goal is not for just the short length of time while maybe the child is being hosted to support this family. We encourage our volunteers to stay involved with these families. I mean, we have a ton of volunteers that still talk to the families that they might have hosted 3 years ago. They still have birthday parties for the kiddos at their house. They have them over for meals. We are finding that these parents in crisis start going to church with our families and continue to do that, and then expand their network. And so this is a commitment to not just a child, but to a family. And that's where we feel that when you have families that are walking alone through all this difficult stuff, you or I have a great family support system, and I can call on my mom or my husband's mom when we have an issue, when we're sick, if we have to go to work and our kids are home. We're talking about families who don't have that. And so we're trying to well, not trying, we've been around for a long time. We've been around for 17 years, all across the country, to really raise these families up. And we feel like the church is really poised. I mean, that's what we're called to. That's what the Lord calls us to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the things when I was talking to you beforehand was that really caught my attention, was this idea that, this is essentially what churches are really about, right? They can do things that government agencies and nonprofits aren't designed to do. Not that what they do is a bad thing or anything like that, right? It's the purpose of a church. One of the purposes of the church is the sense of community and building trust and relationships. And that's what's one of the things that's so great, is this idea of, it's not just, okay, let's just help this family right now in need, and, put a Band-Aid on it and move on. It's, no, we're going to build a relationship with people, right? I mean, and that has such a huge impact on not just the families' lives, but also the people who are investing that time and energy. I imagine in a lot of cases you probably have stories maybe you could share about how the volunteers have been impacted by these families as well, because I'm sure there's it's giving on both ends. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of there's so many of them,
Sure.
and our volunteers are amazing. One of the things that I say that I'm very clear about is this will be the most fulfilling experience, but it will also break your heart, right? And we see that all of the time. But I mean, I have a family who now they are no longer a safe family. They were host families for about 4.5 years. And they're in this season of life that they're taking a little bit of a break because they're going on a mission, actually.
Okay.
But they have been walking through life with a single mom and her child for 4.5 years.
Wow.
The relationship has actually moved to what we call informal. So no longer does it go through safe families. This relationship has evolved, and they are now just family. They have done everything from their church has helped the single mom get a car, to, but here's the thing that I think is really beautiful. So with this family, they are here in Pennsylvania, and their extended family doesn't live here. So one of the things that called to them was the fact that they knew how it felt, right? So, but they had their church community. They weren't isolated in a city. They had transportation. And so those were the things that enabled them to be not isolated, whereas this mom really was. And they had, during COVID, the dad is actually a firefighter and an EMT. And during COVID, mom actually hunkered down with them so that she wasn't in the city. She wasn't having to go to food pantries. And they wanted to make sure that everybody was safe. Well, dad got sick. And then mom got sick. And this single mom and her child were able to return the favor and stay with their children while they were isolating. One was in the hospital, one wasn't.
Wow.
And so, it's just such a beautiful thing. And for this mom who had received so much help for so many years to be able to give back also. And it's a beautiful story of not just giving back, but also, you know, how her confidence was just so boosted. And,
Right.
you know, the family talking about how, you know, she just had a different air about her afterwards because she was able to help and give back also. And I think this family, while they never gave to get anything, it was so special that this situation happened. So that's one of my favorite sort of turnaround, really cool sort of, you know, how it impacted everybody's stories.
Yeah, I mean that's just absolutely beautiful on so many different levels of, you know, again, this moves beyond just like, oh, we're gonna go and do a service project, which they're perfect. There are needs for those type of things. And this is impacting people's lives in
Mhm.
incredible ways, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
what the gospel is all about, right? This is a
right.
way that people can do this. Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about how churches and people in churches can be engaged and involved with this ministry and what you all do.
Sure. So we now, so I call it a turnkey ministry, and sometimes, you know, the higher ups are like, "Oh, what are you talking about? What are you talking-" But let me explain what I mean by that. So this is really, we come in as a ministry of the church. Churches take us on as a ministry, and churches really can make this their ministry and operate how they want to operate. So we come in. And the reason I call it turnkey is um, it is professionally supported. And so when you bring the ministry on, that means that you have assigned to your area a social worker. This social worker actually takes all the referrals, screens through all the referrals, um, does all of the training and the vetting of host family, of volunteers, but specifically host families, which have to have home studies, all of their clearances, you know, so that it's all safe. But the extra added bonus, which the reason I call it turnkey, is that we actually hold insurance to insure all of our volunteers. So the church does not have to worry about any of those pieces.
Wow.
So we worry about the Child Protective Service law, all of the requirements, all of the training, and then all of the insurance. So there's not liability on the church, right? So we come in, um, we have a launch day, and that's where we come in. And I think that you had said you guys called it temple talks, right? So one of us will get up, you know, and you know, we always ask the pastor, let's think about whatever message you want to send, right? You tell me, and I'll go off of that scripture as well. And basically, we do a call to action, and we talk about, you know, what it is that we do, the volunteer roles, and just how important it is in the community. Last year, we kept two in Central PA, which is York, Harrisburg, and Lancaster. We kept 241 children out of foster care.
Wow.
Um, at the average over the last 3 years of our, we call it return to parent rate. So when a family comes into our program and then we, you know, host a child, is 99%. Foster
Wow.
care is hovering around 50%. So we would go in, we would do the temple talk, or, you know, a few minutes from the pulpit, show a video, and then we have an information session. We plan it for later, and any families who are called or interested can come to it. And that's where we go more in depth about the roles, you know, sort of what the requirements are, and train. And we are very like trauma informed training, like all of our volunteers. They have to go through sexual abuse awareness training. You know, we're pretty extensive. I say we're really close to foster care.
Mhm.
And then, you know, once a family is matched up, which it is volunteers. So we actually send out emails and talk to people, and it's always the volunteer's choice. They have a trip, they don't want it, they're not ready, they need to recover, because sometimes they need to emotionally
Sure.
recover, and their family does. It's a family ministry. And it's great for kids because they learn a lot. But that social worker walks alongside the family and the volunteers the entire time. a social worker will be at your house for the first, if let's say you're going to have a kid for 30 days, every single week, there will be a professional at your home. So from there, we hold training sessions in the church and get the volunteers on board. And then, we just start rocking and rolling, and it's one of those things that as quick as the church wants to go or as slow as the church wants to go. I have a great staff. We have a great team that will come in and just walk, everybody through the whole process.
I wanted to ask you, we talked about this before. It's one of the things that really kind of drew my attention is that you had talked about how a lot of the work that you all do, it helps prevent homelessness.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, especially, this is coming from the task force on homelessness and affordable housing. So we're trying to, get people out of homelessness and prevent that as well. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
Sure. So we, our number one referral reason is homelessness. But even families that come into our program where there is another issue going on, they do not have stable housing. So one of the things that we looked at was, what can we do to address and partner up with other agencies for homelessness, because we know that it touches everybody that we see almost. And so there's a couple of things that we do, right? So we definitely have agencies that we work with to try to help people, whether it's helping them find first and last month's rent and then helping them find apartments, or, we have been known to do a couple things to help people get HUD services when before they're actually like 100% evicted, right? And you and I talked about this. The HUD definition of homelessness is you have to be on the street. If you're paying for your own hotel, then you aren't considered homeless. So part of what we do is some of our churches and even our host families, when we have a situation, we'll pay for a couple nights hotel for somebody so that they can receive those services. The other thing that we are just starting right now is a Safe Family Schools program. And this schools program is really, it came out of a task force that Candace Reynolds, who's my Lancaster County outreach coordinator, sat on for Southern Lancaster County, who was started by the school's homeless liaison. And what she was finding was that there is the population of kiddos who are either homeless or doubled up in homes with other families. But then there are this group of people who are at any moment going to face homelessness. So I kind of told you a story. I'll kind of say it again because I think it's a really good sort of explanation. We have a single dad. He gets up every day at 4:30 to go to work. He has two boys who are in middle school and a little girl who's in kindergarten. The boys' school started an hour before the little girls. And so the boys were either not going to school or they were always in school late because they would wait for an hour with this 5-year-old. They didn't want to leave her home alone. Well, that triggered truancy referrals to children and youth, which can then turn into fines in court. And the kids just weren't getting their education. So what we did was we created a network within that community. So for the past 4 months, we had volunteers who went up and picked all 3 kids up from home, took them to breakfast. They coordinated with another little girl whose grandfather watched her before school every day, who was in her class. They would drop the boys off at middle school, the little girl off at the grandfather's house. He would get the 2 girls off to school, and they all made it to school on time and fed. So this father was right on the cusp of having to try to find another job and make as much as he was making. because all of these events were triggering and him having no familial support.
Right.
So what Safe Family Schools does is that we build that community within the school districts. So we are trying to recruit churches around specific school districts so that we could find volunteers to help. But also, you know, if we can hook up the single mom who works first shift and the single mom who works third shift and have them support each other, then they're going to be more stable.
Right.
And so while we will always do what we do now, as far as, you know, hosting and that kind of stuff, we decided to start this program as sort of a stabilization program before it got to critical mass, because there are so many families that are just one incident away from losing their job and then losing their home.
Right. Right. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what can churches do? What's the kind of the range of things that churches can do? Because I know, you know, we've got a whole bunch of churches in our synod, and some of them have, you know, they've got people and they're available to do things, and other churches are small and they don't think that they can do things, although I will tell you they can. But we've got a whole range of different folks. So what are some opportunities for churches to engage in what you're doing?
Sure. So there's a number of different things that churches can do. So I would encourage, kind of like you said, no matter the size of the church, to have a conversation with us and to think about taking on the ministry. In York County, there was a church called York City Church. This is when I first came on 4 years ago. They had 50 people in the church. They had 8 host families.
Wow.
Yes, including the pastor. And they, you know, the size doesn't matter. It is the heart of the congregation. Now, that being said, obviously, taking on this ministry is not going to be everybody's calling.
Right.
But if there are small churches that are around in areas where there are bigger churches, you can always at least present it to your congregation to become volunteers, and we can put them under a bigger church, right, for support if that's what they want. Of course, we are a nonprofit. We have to scrounge and scrape for every penny we get. Money is always wonderful. So, I mean, obviously that's number one for us, because we have to pay for ourselves.
Right.
And
I don't want to just brush that over either, Jessica, because I think it's really important that without, you know, our people are like, oh, the overhead. Well, without the overhead, programs don't happen. Yes, you need volunteers, but somebody has to coordinate that. Someone has to make sure that there are professional staff. Somebody has to do the screening. Someone has to do all of those things. They don't happen on their own, and they don't happen by volunteers, and that's not a bad thing either. So I don't want to brush over that. Like these are essential things that make the ministry happen.
Right. Well, and insurance is expensive. That's the other thing I like to explain to people. Like, you can imagine what it is to insure and train all of these volunteers. So yes, money is a very important piece of it. But you don't have to be a Safe Families church per se if you are a small church and some of your members want to come under a bigger congregation. You know, we also, gift cards is a huge thing, right? We have a couple of ministries that were started at churches that aren't Safe Family churches, but they just do a gift card ministry, and they send us gift cards for, sometimes we use them for host families. It's because of visits. A lot of times we use them for our families, you know, for food and gas. You know, we don't have it, but I will say, and this is definitely going to be a call to action for volunteers. We could have helped double that amount of children if we had had more volunteers. We still have what we call hostings that go unfulfilled because we don't have enough people. And and let me be clear, I don't know if there'll ever be enough people.
Right. Right.
right? I
Of
mean,
course.
and that's the nature of the beast. But so one of the things I just want to kind of go back to a little bit because I think it's super cool. When I talk about this being a family ministry, because obviously you have kids in your home, but I want to talk about the kids and what the kids learn because I've heard of like some amazing stories,
Yeah.
just of how these kids accept these children, these strangers, right? So you know, it's very clear all the time if you want to look at pure heart and you know, you want to see the Lord, look at a child, right? But as they're doing this, they walk through a lot. So we part of the thing that we do when we train volunteers and help them is let's talk about how you're going to talk to your children about stuff. We have kids that you might watch TV to go to sleep every night. Well, if they're coming to your home, day one, you can't just tell them, okay, sorry, I don't care, that's not my room,
Right.
right? But then your kids are going to be like, well, wait a minute, I
Right.
don't understand, right? So there has to be, and something as simple as that teaches such a valuable lesson
Right.
about, you know, rules, but then also about meeting somebody where they are. And
Right.
maybe they need something that's different than you,
Yeah.
right? Or having, you know, I remember I went on a home visit years ago. There's this little girl, and I keep letting her borrow all of my clothes and all of my shoes. And she has one pair of sparkly shoes that she came with, and I wanted to borrow them, and she won't let me.
Mm.
She was really upset. So
Yeah.
then a conversation had to happen on a 6-year-old level with this little girl about this is the only thing this child owns
Right.
that's hers and what that means. And her mom said that when it was time for this little girl to go home, her daughter gave her half her shoes
Wow.
and said, okay, that's not cool. I get to pick from all these shoes. And it just teaches such a great lesson to kids. And it's something that you can do. And it's quite frankly, it's a controlled environment. It's your home, you know, and it
Right.
enables them to really see because it's this real person and it's not an abstract thing anymore about you're so lucky, you have so much.
Right.
It's real. And I think it's so important, especially nowadays, for kids to see that, especially after they've been so isolated with the pandemic,
Right.
that maybe they don't see as much in their bubbles as
Yeah.
they would have before.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful thing for families. And I want to mention that just because I'm sure as a parent, it's a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wait a minute. You know, but we also like we would never put like if you have a teenage daughter, we would not place a teenage boy in your home.
Sure. Right.
Let me
Right.
be clear, right?
Right. 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 You're going to be safe about this and not, you know, not crazy stuff and all that type of stuff. Absolutely.
Right, right. But you know, there's just a lot of ways to get back to your, you know, and I could sit here and tell stories all day, so I know I have to focus
Right.
myself back on like what
Well,
you said.
I got to tell you, that was really powerful, though. That last story that you told, I think, I mean, that kind of just expresses it all right there. That this isn't just about one directional type of ministry. This is you know, this is what so what we always talk about, right? How God shows up and encounters us, all of us, and it transforms all of us, right, into this beautiful community that of a vulnerable relationships, right?
Right.
I'll get off my soapbox. As a pastor, this is the thing, like, you know, where I think it's just like this is living faith. So as we're getting towards an end here, geographically, the area would be really helpful. So our synod covers, I'm going to give you kind of roughly, from the state border, Maryland state border, up to Perry County, and roughly Chambersburg on that end to Lancaster, and of course it goes out to like the county borders of that. So that's just kind of a rough type of thing? Like, do you guys cover that entire area? Do you part of it? What's the situation with that?
So we are actually right now, we just got a couple host families in Perry County. So we're actually trying to move into Perry County. We do
Okay.
cover all the way to the Maryland border. We are trying to move into Adams County right now. We have host families right there on the Hanover border. We go all the way up to through northern Dauphin County. We Chambersburg is a little far,
Okay.
but we encompass like most of the geographical area that you have
Right.
said. And
Perfect.
you know, part of what we are trying to do is where there's a need, we're trying to expand.
Right.
So, you know, we obviously we need to have buy-in from
Right.
churches, number one, but also the counties. But right now we already have, you know, and I can tell you right now we have Berks, Adams County, York County, Perry County. We're starting to move into Lancaster. We're starting Lebanon. So we really are pretty expansive in central PA. And we're hoping to, as soon as we can partner with a county, we can move into that area.
That's great.
So, you know, we go to counties when we get a few churches who brought on the ministry. So certainly, even if, you know, anybody out there who's listening, they say, hey, my area really needs this. I wonder if we have it. If we could partner with some churches, we can go to the county and we can start it.
Yeah.
That's what's so great. This was started as a grassroots movement. And it was started as, what if those that follow the Lord help those that don't or don't know him yet?
Right.
You know, what if you, what if all of us who follow the Lord created a new system that helped these families when the unthinkable happened? And we no longer accepted a system that is reactive like children and youth and created the proactive system of showing his love. And what if all of us stood up and did this?
Yeah.
And it's just grown to 116 sites across the US. We're now in Mexico, we're now in Canada, we're now in the UK, because it's catching on. And
Yeah.
you know, we have 25,000 volunteers across the US.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And we can come into your community, any community, and see where you need us. During the pandemic, because I'm crazy, I partnered up with Black Rock Retreat. We raised $20,000 and housed 10 families in the middle of COVID. And we were riding up there and doing casework and helping them find housing. Those families are now housed, and they have been since 2020. So we will come in and we will meet you where you are, and we will help your church achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And it doesn't matter where your heart is. If your heart is a prison ministry, we can come in and help when somebody violates, or if they're going to prison, we will take their kids while they're in prison so they don't lose custody and that family unit can remain intact.
Yeah.
You know, if it's child abuse prevention, if it's homelessness, it doesn't matter. We go in, stabilize the family, and help the church figure out how to walk alongside these families.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. And what I hear in that also is opportunities for churches to partner with not just other Lutheran churches for our sake, but also ecumenical relationships, which is really important to the LCA, which we have partnerships with 8 other denominations for pulpit sharing and everything else. And so for you congregations that are out there and you're looking, you've got a neighbor congregation that's a Methodist or Presbyterian or whatever, here's an opportunity to meet your neighbors, get out of the building and do ministry with other Christians as well. So I think that's wonderful. Jessica, tell us how do people reach you? How do they find out more information, website,
Sure.
all that kind of great stuff?
Sure. So you can go to www.safe-families.org. And there's a whole website kind of explaining who we are, what we do. And you can fill out a contact form on there. Our school program that, we're just getting underway, there's a page for that. If that's something that churches might be interested in. There's just a lot of information. There's a contact form you can fill out. You can also just call our office at 717-234-2367. And, just say that you're, interested in safe families, and whatever county you're in, that message will get to that outreach coordinator, who will be able to contact you. And even if it's just a conversation, right? We're not,
Right.
we're happy to tell you about us or talk to you about your area and what we can do to help.
And so that, again, that was safe-families.org, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good. Any last things that you want to share that we did not cover?
I think I just want to tell one last story.
Yeah,
And,
great.
I told you this story when we met for lunch. I told you the story about when I worked at Children and Youth, but I'm going to tell another story because it
Okay.
really has to do with homelessness.
Yeah.
And, I came from Children and Youth. And, I had always said that I had this realization a couple years in, that what was missing was the Lord. I couldn't pray with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hadn't talked to him in a couple years. And I just was seeing all of this stuff. And so out of that came me looking for something different. I came to Safe Families. But there was still sort of a question in my mind. Did I do the right thing? Am I not helping as many kids? So a couple years ago, my house burned down. We lost everything. And my husband and I and my 3 children had to go to a hotel. And friends of mine had run out and got us each a pair of pajamas, and an outfit for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And we're walking down the hallway of this hotel. And my husband and I look at each other. In front of us are our 3 children with a little Kohl's bag flung over their shoulder, their heads down, their shoulders slumped. And they're walking to their hotel room knowing that everything they owned was gone. And it struck me in that moment that that's what my clients feel like all of the time. This was one moment in time for me. And I knew we were going to be okay, and we had insurance and we were going to get everything back. And just watching my children walk down that hallway with their heads slumped and that one little bag. And I thought, I'm definitely where I need to be, because nobody but the Lord could do something this huge and this big.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of times that when I questioned, now I wish he wouldn't have showed it to me in that moment, in that way. I'm like, okay, I be careful what you wish for, right? But the point is that there are these moments when you walk through this ministry where you have these epiphanies, or you have, you just stop and go, wow, yeah, this is what people feel like every day.
Yeah.
And it's just going to take everybody to help.
Yeah, I think, and I just want to thank you for being vulnerable with that story. For me, I will tell you, those type of personal encounters and personal experiences, I mean, the authenticity that comes through that, I mean, there's the example of, this is how we encounter Jesus, right? I don't want to get into too much theology, but Luther wrote in this Heidelberg disputation in the 1500s, he talked about the theology of glory and the theology of the cross. And the theology of glory is, oh, look, you can see God in the sunshine. Okay, great, wonderful. But the theology of the cross is in the midst of the worst possible things, knowing that God is right there with us and shows up, right? I mean, that's the theology of the cross, is that we believe that in the worst possible moment, that's where God is, right? And what I hear you saying in the ministry that you're doing is very oriented towards the theology of the cross, with these families and in their worst possible moments. There you are, right? And we're the hands and feet of Christ showing up, and it's also them being the hands and feet of Christ showing up to us as well. So I just wanted wanted to share that. I think it's, what you're talking about is really important, and I'm sure that the people who are listening, a lot of folks have had their own type of experiences, their own type of encounters, and I know that they can identify with those type of things. Well, Jessica, thank you very much for your time. I know it will be very enlightening and educational for folks, and it's my hope that people will then take that next step of reaching out, to be church, to be disciples, and to do ministry that they feel called to in whatever way that is. That here's an opportunity to really live out faith in a variety of different ways, with different folks, to really go all in whatever way that people are gifted in. And so I just want to thank you again for your time, and I pray that the ministry goes strong.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Right.